Hello, everyone. Welcome. And I have a fantastic guest with me. Bev is joining me to talk about something that I think everyone needs to know, honestly, and it's just really dealing with attachment styles. Today, we're going to try to tailor it around people who are going through some sort of separation or divorce, and really what your attachment styles are and becoming your best self. Through a divorce or separation. So, you're in for a great time. I can promise you that you will definitely have a lot to reflect on, and Bev is just absolutely fantastic. So yeah, Bev, you know what? Let's start at the very beginning. So, what are attachment styles for people that don't even know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So, what is attachment and why do we have these different styles? So, when we talk about attachment, we're really talking about the way in which we form emotional bonds with other people.
Okay.
Now, all of us as humans, we all have a particular style, and this is learned behavior. So, I want to be very clear to delineate that we're not talking in any way about a mental illness or personality disorder. What we're talking about is the way in which we learned from a very, very young age how to interrelate with other people, essentially, how to give and receive love. And we learned this really, really early on from our caregivers, right? So whether that was a mother, a father, a grandmother, an aunt,
Yeah.
in our earliest years from 0 to 5. So the way
Okay.
that people interacted with us in our earliest years created this template in our minds for how we give and receive love and create those emotional bonds. And those patterns follow us into adulthood. And we
Okay.
see those patterns play out
Mhm.
all the time, especially in romantic relationships.
Hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
I love what you said there, like making it clear that it is learned behavior because, someone can think, well, is it something that I need to get? I mean, make it more complicated, whatever treatment process they're thinking that this requires. You're saying it's learned behavior, and maybe if we understand ourselves, we can unlearn some of the things that we've learned, right?
I love that you just said that. Absolutely, because everything that we learn, we could also unlearn and relearn. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not, you're so on the money here. It's not, we don't diagnose someone. It's not a condition. It's just the
Mhm.
way in which we enter and interact in the world, right?
Absolutely.
A set of patterns.
Okay, so what kind of, let's talk about styles now. So at least we get the
Okay.
idea what the attachment part is. So what kind of attachment styles have you observed?
So there are two broad categories of styles, what we
Okay.
call secure, so securely attached, and insecurely attached. So
Okay.
the securely attached is sort of the utopia, right? What we're all more or less striving for.
Okay.
Generally, when a child grows up in a home where there is consistent and predictable caregiving
Okay.
and emotional attunement to the child, that
Hmm.
child will learn some very important things. They'll learn to be able to identify and trust their emotions and communicate their emotions with the understanding and expectation that the person they're communicating those emotions to will respond in a healthy way.
Hmm.
And so when we're talking about a young child who, maybe they're cranky because they need a nap and they stomp their foot and they say, I'm feeling angry right now.
Okay.
That's actually not a bad thing. The child is recognizing their emotion, they're
Okay.
verbalizing it. Now, the way
Yes.
in which the caregiver will interact and what they do next will
Hmm.
actually determine a pattern for the child. So, if someone turns around to the child and says, I understand you're angry. I get angry too sometimes, but it's time for your nap, so let's settle down.
Okay.
Or, I don't care if you're angry, stop crying, or I'll give you something to be angry about.
Okay, that sounds also familiar.
Right. So I grew up in the era where I heard a lot, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about,
Yep.
which is really, really invalidating. So what the child realizes very quickly is it is not safe for me to speak my authentic truth. I
Hmm.
have to monitor myself to please my adult because I don't want to displease them. So this is
Hmm.
where we start seeing the initial break from your authenticity. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So a child again who grew up in a home where there was a secure attachment, someone who was emotionally attuned to them, they generally grow up and they do very well in long-term relationships. These are the people that we see most of the time in good, healthy marriages,
Oh.
which means that they generally have a good sense of self, good sense of
Mhm.
self-esteem. They're comfortable being alone. They're also comfortable being, interdependent with their partner. They
Mhm.
generally have good communication skills, good, their boundaries are well defined, they understand boundaries, they're generally emotionally regulated. So there's no
Okay.
such thing as perfect. Like these people aren't perfect, but they learned a good set of life skills
Yeah.
in childhood that when it comes to becoming a partner, a marriage partner in life,
Mhm.
a spouse, they're generally pretty well prepared for that role.
Wow. Okay. I think this is almost a lesson for all of us that are
Yeah.
caregivers in some capacity, right? I guess we need to be more mindful in the way we respond to children around us. So yeah, honestly, I know we were thinking more, people that are like the adults themselves, but that's something that I'm reflecting on a lot, for myself as well as a parent, even though my kids are a little bit older, but just realizing that there is that responsibility in how your responses can just shape their entire lives in ways that you never even thought of, right? So
Yes.
yeah, something
Yes,
for us
that's
to think about.
exactly true. And I'm glad
Yeah.
you're making those connections because it's very, very true, right? Because all of these kids, they grow up to be adults, right? And then they go out into
Mhm.
the dating world and then they become parents themselves, right?
Yes.
So this is where we talk about sort of like generational trauma, right? So
Yes.
so we'll leave the secure attachment sort of over here as the utopia. Now talk about the other broad category is people who have what's called an insecure attachment,
Okay.
right? And so within the spectrum,
Hmm.
it's like a sliding scale almost, right? So within the
Okay.
spectrum of insecure, you have three subcategories.
Okay.
And on one end of things, you have what's called the anxious preoccupied or the
Mm.
anxious attacher.
Mm.
Then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the dismissive avoidant or the avoidant attacher. And
Mm.
then somewhere in the middle, you've got a small group of sort of complex folks that have a mishmash of anxious and avoidance, and they're called either the fearful avoidance or the disorganized attacher. Now, we see some really distinct patterns in what these children experienced and then how they bring that into their adult relationships. And
Mm.
what's so important is when you understand this, you could start to understand someone's emotional patterns, their thought patterns, what's going to trigger them. And, if we're talking about divorce and we're talking about especially high conflict divorce,
Yeah.
the majority of the time, we're talking about one or probably two partners that have an insecure attachment.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
right off the gate, people who
Yeah.
have an insecure attachment did not learn about emotional regulation in childhood. So,
Hmm.
it was not modeled for them. They
Yeah.
didn't learn to identify their emotions or how to
Okay.
communicate them. So they tend to be poorer on the communication front. So they tend to be the ones who have explosive emotions. So either they're
Okay.
feeling their emotions way too big,
Hmm.
so it's almost dramatic, right? It's
Hmm.
chaotic. And
Okay.
one minute they're up, down, because they really never learned how to stabilize their emotions. And it's a skill. it's a
Hmm.
skill like that we learn. Like I always say, some kids learn in their house of origin, they learn how to cook, and
Yes.
some kids don't.
Yeah. True. True.
Emotional regulation is the same thing. If nobody modeled it for you, if your
Yes.
parents were always screaming and slamming doors and walking out of room, that's how you know how to interact,
Exactly.
right?
Okay,
It's
so
like
you're saying your attachment styles is it's sounding to me like it kind of goes hand in hand with sort of your communication style. Is that what am I understanding that correctly?
you
Okay.
are. Yeah, it goes
Okay.
hand in hand. Your attachment style goes hand in hand with your personality needs, your
Okay.
emotional patterns, your communication style, your
Mm-hmm.
relationship to boundaries, and also your coping mechanisms or behaviors. And these are
Okay.
so highly predictive based
Okay.
on your earliest set of patterns and your attachment style that you could, once you understand how predictive this is in terms of human behavior, you can watch two people in a conflict and know immediately what attachment style they have.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That
it
really
is.
is
Because I'm sure
interesting.
in your line of work and divorce, it's a lot of conflict mediation.
Yes, absolutely, it is. It is. But and
Yeah.
so I was wondering, so is it so for people that are going, or people in general, is it important for them to sort of know what their attachment style is? Is that a good first step to before you do
Yeah.
the work that you need to do? Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is for a number of reasons. So what I want to do is I want to just walk through a little bit about the I would say origins of each of these
Please.
subcategories and then what it looks like when you become an adult. But again, all of these people who have an insecure attachment style, they haven't learned to emotionally regulate, right? And when you're not
Mhm.
emotionally regulated, you're really at the mercy of your emotions.
Hmm.
A lot of times you're on edge, you don't necessarily feel well. So, that's not a good place to live,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
our nervous system has two modes. We have rest and digest. Like you and I are both sort of in a relaxed mode now.
Yes.
When, and all humans are the same. When we are presented with a threat or perceived threat, we
Mm-hmm.
switch into our threat mode, right? Where we
Mm-hmm.
either respond by fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And fawn is the fourth response that people have. Fawning is people pleasing.
Okay. I was like, I don't think I've heard that one. Okay.
I know we always talk about fight and flight, but
Yes.
freeze and fawn are there's really four responses.
Sorry, what's
And
the
I
other
am
one before fun? What's did you
freeze,
freeze?
freeze.
Okay.
Yeah, and you
Mhm.
know what's so interesting is that we see this in nature too. Like we
Oh,
like a possum, for example,
uh-huh.
when they're up against a threat, like
Yes.
another animal is threatening them, the
Yeah.
possum will play dead. They'll play dead. They will freeze. They'll play dead. That's how they protect themselves. And so
Uh-huh.
yeah, so what's interesting is that we've got these sort of very
Yeah.
primitive responses as humans in
Yeah.
order to protect ourselves. So the question is, why are you being triggered? And your mechanism that you're choosing to protect yourself is very closely related to your attachment style.
Amazing. Please keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay. So if we're working just within the bucket of those who are in the insecure attachment. Now, in North
Yeah.
America, it's about 50% of the population have an insecure attachment. So it is a significant number. Okay. So
Mhm.
out of that, let's say, 50% of the population, I would say, let's say, uh, 40% have an anxious attachment, another 40% have an avoidant attachment, and then 20% have a mix of the two. Okay, so
Okay.
someone who has an anxious attachment generally grew up in a home where the love was sort of given and taken. It was unpredictable.
Mm.
And we see this often when a child is raised, for example, by a parent who has, let's say, an alcohol addiction. So
Okay.
one day the mother, let's say, is very loving and generous and warm, and the next day they're mean and they're cruel. The
Okay.
child can't predict what version of the mom they will get at any moment in time. And so and the child starts to internalize this as I must be doing something wrong here if mom is angry at me or mom is ignoring me or
Mm.
something like that. And so what happens is that they generally become overly congenial. They become people pleasers. They become mama's little
Mm.
helper. They're the ones who do everything perfectly by the book. They become sort of perfectionists.
Yeah.
And because a child doesn't have the ability to say, my mom's going through a difficult time. She has a substance abuse problem. It's not about me. Children always say it, always internalize it. If my mother's not loving towards me, it must be because I am undeserving. And
Mm.
so the child grows up with these core wounds attached to this attachment style. The core wounds, top one being, I will be abandoned,
Oh,
right? because
yes.
because the love is given, it's taken, it's given, it's never
Yeah.
consistent. They often have other core wounds around I am disliked, I am unlovable, I will be excluded, I am bad, I am not good enough, all of that. And so you can see how carrying those wounds into
Mm.
adulthood would greatly affect someone's self-esteem.
Absolutely.
So people who are anxiously attached, they have very little trust in themselves, but they afford everyone else around them a great amount of trust.
Mm.
So when they
Okay.
get into a romantic relationship, they behave in very specific ways. The
Mm-hmm.
romantic partner becomes their everything and their all because
Oh,
they are so reliant on this partner to help them regulate their emotions because they don't know how to do it on their own. So if
yes.
they're having a bad day, they need their partner to help to make them feel better. They don't know how to
Mm.
do it. Now, if you extend it into divorce, when you talk about someone who has a core wound of I am unlovable, I will
Mm.
be abandoned, and that person is actively going through a divorce and
Yeah.
it's triggering their core wounds, it
Mm.
will feel devastating for them.
Oh,
So, and again, because they're not able to regulate their emotions and their emotions already feel so big, when
yeah.
you're hitting on the primary core wound there that a divorce would hit
Mm.
on, it's almost unmanageable for
Oh,
someone in that space. And so we do see people who really, really have a very hard time if they were heavily dependent on their partner,
yeah.
um, because it feels to them as though their actual survival is being threatened.
Oh, wow. That
And
is
tell me, Angela, if
insightful.
you've heard this. Tell me if
Mm.
you've heard this before from,
Yeah.
and by the way, attachment styles are not gendered. So this could be a man or a woman that I'm describing. But tell
Okay.
me if you've ever heard someone in a mediation turn to you and say, how am I going to live without them?
Yes. No, and yes, a lot of times. A lot of times.
A lot of times,
A lot
to
of
them, it
times.
actually feels like I won't be able to survive without you.
Oh,
It's that threatening.
yeah.
And again, what we see a lot is that these are the people that often get called uh, needy in relationships. They need a very high degree of reassurance. They need a lot of attention. So
Hmm.
it, it's difficult. So if you're going through a divorce for someone who has an anxious attachment,
Yeah.
you can be absolutely sure that there's going to be a lot of, I would say, almost dramatic emotions.
Okay.
big emotions. Like you can expect outbursts. You can expect quite a few moments of irrationality. And the reason I say that is because when we move into our threat mode or nervous system, the rational part of our brain shuts off momentarily because
Mm.
really we're focused on how do I deal with the immediate threat. And
Yes.
so if you're trying to negotiate with someone, for a reasonable, let's say, custody arrangement or something,
Yeah.
and they're triggered in that moment, they simply won't be able to follow along with you on a rational
Yeah.
level.
No, I mean this is so true, and I mean I guess we can explore this a little bit more later as well, because I just what comes to mind for me is just people when you're dealing around, support, and sometimes people would say, "How do I live without them?" And you think it's a money issue, and so for the lawyers, we're crunching the numbers, we're doing everything we can because like we can fix that. Don't worry, leave it with us, and we do everything we can to get them how much they need. And sometimes we even have, clients go to say a professional, we call them, so if it's a collaborative process, we would have the financial neutral. So we're like, well, help this person create a budget because we're here in worry or anxiety about finances. And so here's your budget. And this, so we're going to help you negotiate enough money. And what's crazy is you get, all the monies that they want. Oh, well, that's over the budget, I should say. But yet you still hear, how are you going to do it? And this is so insightful. It's not about the dollars or cents. And this is why I'm loving this conversation, Bev, because there's all these aspects to things. And as legal professionals and financial professionals, we're doing these things and we're wondering, well, you do have the money, you'll be fine. Like you're okay. We're getting, and don't worry, in addition to this support, you're getting these thousands of millions of dollars possibly in a settlement. You can live without them, right? Is what we're thinking. Possibly even
Right.
live your best life going forward. But,
Yeah.
you know,
So interesting. You're looking at it from a rational perspective. This
yeah,
person is really, they're looking at it from an emotional perspective.
yeah.
So, one of the things that I might ask if I'm in that situation is, what is really your true concern? Like, tell me what you're thinking. And if they say, I don't think I'll have enough money to live, instead of just like, well, how much is enough? I might ask like, well, what do you think would happen if you don't have enough money? Now, you want to get to the fear because the fear is irrational. So we
Mhm.
can question,
Yeah,
right? We can learn to question our thoughts. So we have so many thoughts in our minds, and most
yeah.
people aren't even aware of listening to their thoughts.
Hmm.
Like there's like this recording that goes off in all
Yeah,
of our minds, right? So you
yeah,
have to learn to start listening to it,
yeah.
right? And so, um,
Mm.
yeah, it's oftentimes it's not about the money.
Yes. No, it's not. But I love this. So I know I kind of took you off and you were, talking about the different insecure attachment styles and yes, so but it's just I could just see it helped me reflect on something and I just jumped in there. So I'll kind of let you go on. So we were just talking about sort of the anxious
Yeah.
attachment, right? So
Well,
yeah.
I love that you jumped in because you have that real world experience of, working in these sort of difficult mediation sessions with people
Yes.
who likely do have insecure attachment styles. So you are going to see often enough, I would venture a guess to say big dramatic responses.
Yes. Absolutely.
Now, in this particular group too, we do see a lot of addictions
Oh,
because the feelings are so uncomfortable and so big. We often see alcohol, drugs, anything that's used to numb the physical sensations that they haven't learned yet how to process. And the fascinating thing is that emotions,
yeah.
this is so interesting. Emotions, when they pass through our body, last 90 seconds.
Oh, really?
On average, about 90
Yeah.
seconds.
Wow,
The, the
it feels a lot longer for me.
Doesn't it? Okay, you know
Yeah.
why? Because we
Yeah.
tend to tell ourselves stories that
Yeah.
reinforce the belief that we have around the emotion. So,
Yeah.
for example, if I'm sitting at a mediation table with you and I start to feel sad, if I allow myself to just feel sad for 90 minutes and say, of course I feel sad, I'm in the middle of a separation, but that's normal and I'm going to honor that. Or I could say to myself, of course I'm feeling sad. I always knew I was unlovable. No one was going to love me. Of course he was going to leave me. And if I
Yeah.
replay that playing for, I can make this feeling of sadness last weeks.
Yeah. So, sorry, did you say 90 minutes or 90 seconds? Is it
90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay, good. Just wanted to be sure. It's 90 seconds. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a feeling,
Yeah.
right? It's a feeling. And then what happens is that we tend to make the feeling last longer by telling
Mm.
stories around it. Yeah. But anyways, I'm going to go back to
Yes.
our category. So interestingly enough, those who have an anxious attachment,
Yes.
they generally will couple up. We see this often. They will couple up with someone who has an avoidance attachment. Now, someone who has an avoidance attachment, it is exactly what it sounds like. They grew up, generally speaking, in a home where there was emotional neglect. So
Okay.
maybe they grew up in a home where the parents were very stoic, things were just swept under the rug, feelings were not discussed, hugs weren't given. Maybe there were too many kids in the home. Maybe it was a
Mm.
high demand religion. There's lots of scenarios where a child can be emotionally neglected.
Mm.
Now, what's interesting is that those that have a dismissive avoidance style,
Mhm.
when I speak with them, they almost always tell me that they had a good childhood. So they'll tell me, good childhood, I had a warm bed and 3 meals a day. So great, that's a good start. Like, did anyone say that they loved you? Oh no, we didn't interact that way. Any hugs? No. Okay, like any, like I'm proud of you? No, none of that. So what the child doesn't realize, which is so important to them, is they need that emotional attunement for healthy growth. And so
Mhm.
because they were emotionally neglected and that wasn't present, they never developed that. They have no
Okay.
template for their own emotions. They
Mm.
actually just do such a good job at repressing. They just push down all their emotions.
Mm.
And so they learn at a very young age that I'm kind of on my own out here.
Mm.
There's really no point in asking dad for help. He's not going to help me.
Mm.
I'm on my own. So they become hyper independent, overly self-reliant, I would say, fearful, scared of intimacy. It's very difficult for them to allow people to get close to them because they
Mm.
don't even know what that feels like. It's
Okay.
foreign, right? And so when the mind perceives something to be unfamiliar, we
Mhm.
perceive it as a threat,
Okay.
even because it's unfamiliar. So these people have a very difficult time in romantic relationships because they often are, described as secretive, needing a lot of alone time, not very,
Mhm.
not very difficulty with intimacy, not very communicative. They're not great with language. They tend to communicate far more with body language. So here's another scenario that you see
Yeah.
probably very often. Like
Yeah.
how often do you see someone who just hits their limits and say, I'm out of here, just walks out of the room?
Often enough.
There you go.
Often
That's
enough.
that's the dismissive avoidance. Okay, so now
Yes.
you've got on one side, you've got the anxious, preoccupied who's crying because they're crying, because their emotions are just so big they can't deal with it. They don't even know why they're crying. Their their baseline is they are sad and lonely. That's their baseline.
Okay.
And then you have the baseline of the dismissive avoidant who is irritable, like
Yeah.
low level anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and and is really protective of their space.
Mm.
They don't want to be intruded on. Like freedom and independence are super important to them. And they're probably being forced to sit in a room with someone and do this mediation. And to them, it feels like you're taking their hand and sticking it into hot coals. Like you're forcing me to be here because they don't like this. They don't want to talk about their feelings. They don't want to be there. Just let it go away.
Yeah.
Right. And so this person,
Mhm.
maybe within the first 5 minutes would be like, I'm out of here. And they just walk out.
Yes. Oh,
Right.
wow. No,
Yeah.
that
So
is
they
that is
shut
so
down.
true. Yes.
Yeah. So the dismissive avoidance, the idea of avoidance is that they are avoiding their own painful emotions and
Hmm.
they are going to avoid yours as well.
So it's not, um, I mean, I guess how do you deal with that? But I guess there's nothing you can really do as a third party. It's the work that the person has, it's work that everyone has to own and do the work for themselves ultimately, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple that is in those two modes, and I'm sort of
Mhm.
talking in extremes, right? Because most
Yes.
people fall somewhere along the spectrum, right? Like I
Yeah.
have definitely known people who were really far down on either one of the streams, like
Yes.
of the extremes, but usually people are a little bit maybe not as extreme in one area or another. Um,
Hmm.
but if you get people who, highly anxious and highly avoidant, and they're
Yeah.
trying to work on an agreement together, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yes.
It's likely going to be a long, protracted event to get them to
Yes.
agree on anything
Yep. No.
because the one who's anxious is going to feel like they're never heard or seen or validated, and the one who is avoidant is always going to feel like you're asking more and more and more of me and I have nothing more to give you.
Yes.
These
Yes.
are emotional states, right? It's not
Exactly.
about the finances, it's not about do I see the kid on Wednesday or Thursday. It's an emotional state. And
Yeah.
so the best thing to do is for people to start creating an awareness about themselves and
Hmm.
to start repairing and healing themselves. And healing, we talk about healing like it's some like mystical thing, but healing, it's like a healing and then it's a journey and it's done. Healing is a process of understanding
Yeah.
this is why I think the way that I do, because I was patterned in childhood. Now, in childhood, it made sense for me to protect myself this way, but I no longer need to do that. And
Hmm.
so I can start challenging, some of my own thought patterns and, some of my core wounds. And I
Hmm.
can learn how to communicate in a way that's far more effective, right?
Yes.
I can learn these things. And so if I start to learn how to communicate a little bit better, and I'll speak from my side because I was a strong avoidant for years. And so now what I'm able to do is if I find myself feeling like I want to avoid something,
Yeah.
which is the flee response, right?
Hmm.
Right? Fight or
Yes,
flight. The anxious
exactly.
person is going to people please or they're going to fight.
Okay. Okay.
the the person who is the dismissive avoidant, they're gonna flee. Like, find me an exit, I'm gone. That is still sort of me to some degree, but now instead of just disappearing, like where
Yeah.
did Bev go? I will say to my partner, you know what, my flee instinct, like my flight instinct is kicking in really, really strong. I know that I need to take a break from this conversation. Can you please give me an hour to myself? I'll calm down and then we'll come back in an hour and we'll finish. And
Nice.
and that works like a charm,
Yes.
right? Because that's healing. That's
Hmm.
healing. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're not going to get triggered or all of a sudden, you're going to have your the way in which you deal with things
Hmm.
will become different as you learn how to communicate your authentic truth.
Yes.
That's another big thing is that oftentimes when we're growing up, as I spoke about earlier, we
Hmm.
are not conditioned. We're
Hmm.
actually conditioned not to speak our authentic truth.
Yes, that is accurate. No, that is
Yeah,
accurate.
it's very accurate. And so again, these people grow up and you're in a mediation situation
Hmm.
and you might turn to both parties and say, "So does that work for you?" And the other person might feel like they don't have the right to say, "Actually, it doesn't work for me." They might go,
Hmm.
"Oh, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's okay," because they've been conditioned to people please.
No, this is absolutely true. And you find, and it's honestly not, and this is why, I mean, from my perspective as a lawyer, I really think that it's important for people to do this work,
Yeah,
whether during or before, going through a mediation. It's important for us to all understand ourselves because it derails things. So you might have someone, it's always shocking. We're at a mediation session and we think we have a deal because someone at that moment has said yes. And so we think we have a deal, and then they come back the next day, or maybe you receive an email where they're now stepping back from what they agreed. And from listening to you, Bev, what I'm seeing now is that person was just needed to please the parties in the room at the time. And so
mhm,
now, maybe behind the computer screen or through their lawyers, they're able to now, go back on that deal because they probably never wanted that deal in the first place, right?
correct.
And now you have the other side saying, well, I can't do this anymore. Mediation was just a waste of time. I knew it would never work. Like, we're getting our lawyers, and it's time to take this to court. And I can see, so this is really interesting because that's why I was going to ask, how understanding your attachment style can really help you during, a separation.
Yeah, so because your attachment style is so predictive of, again, your personality needs,
Yes.
your emotional patterns, your communication, your relationship to boundaries, and your coping mechanisms,
Hmm.
you can identify certain strategies to allow yourself to extend beyond what you would normally do. So, for example, someone who's anxious, preoccupied, again, would likely put the needs of someone else above their own
Hmm.
because they learned in childhood that the way to be loved and liked was to be at the service of other people. If
Yeah.
I'm likable, right, there's like someone who feels unlovable will go to
Hmm.
great lengths to be likable. And
Yeah.
so they will do everything and anything to please someone else. That's how
Hmm.
they survive in the world. So that person coming into a mediation who has never been authentically themselves,
Yes.
they don't even at that point in time, they likely don't even have an understanding of what do I actually need to feel
Hmm.
whole and healthy and safe,
Yeah.
right? So, and the reason they're not speaking up is because they don't feel safe in doing that. They don't have the self-esteem to say, I know what I want and I trust and I deserve this and I think
Yeah.
it's reasonable. So I'm going to speak up.
Hmm.
And so a lot of this work is about not only understanding your attachment, but then understanding what are your personality needs. Like, what is it that you need to feel safe and secure and happy?
Yeah.
Which I cannot tell you how many people get to adulthood. I mean, I'm almost 50. And
Hmm.
I was, it's about 10 years ago, that in my 40s, that I finally had the conversation with myself. What do I need to feel happy, safe, and healthy? And so
Hmm.
many people never have that conversation with themselves. So if you're going in to negotiate a separation agreement where you're talking
Yeah.
about custody of the children and finances, shouldn't you know what's important to you? Like,
Yes.
so it might be that custody of my kids is more important to me than anything else. So
Yes.
that's the one thing that I'm going to really sort of focus on, and I'm going to give way to all the other things
Yeah,
because I know where my focus is.
exactly. Yes.
Someone who is angry and has no idea what's important to them because they
Mhm.
haven't really reflected on it, they will argue on every toothpick, on every, you know,
No,
on every turn of the page, they will argue.
no, it's true. But so at what point in the process, so I'm just thinking someone watching this has probably seen themselves and I mean for a lot of people, hopefully they would understand that there's work that needs to be done and needs to be done and they will do it. But what about others that are thinking, well, it's not me because I can see scenarios where you're thinking, well, I'm angry, but it's not so much because of me, it's what they did. Is there a place for that? And how do you sort of manage, where someone's actually doing something, or how do you even know when it's someone doing something to you that's causing the anger versus it being sort of this trauma that you've, kind of not, or states that you've not unlearned from childhood, really?
There's a couple of things.
Yeah.
So emotions in themselves, I always say are not bad, right? We tend to ascribe meaning to them, like anger is bad and happy is good, but emotions are neutral, right? So
Hmm.
if someone is angry at you, or you're angry in
Yeah.
response to someone, it
Yeah.
serves a purpose. It's telling you that person has crossed my boundaries. That's why I'm angry. So
Okay.
it's a signal. So when someone says something to you rude or is disrespectful and you get angry, pay attention because your body's signaling to you, I don't like what's happening here,
Okay.
right? So the first thing to do is to recognize the signals that your body and your mind are sending you and honor that. Right? You don't have to necessarily respond, but honor that someone has crossed your boundary. Now, ask yourself, are they crossing the boundary because you have up until that point always allowed them to cross your boundary?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because oftentimes behavior escalates because we've allowed XYZ behavior from people.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that people don't realize that you actually do have a lot of power in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what you allow in your life, right?
Okay.
So, most of the time, you're able to set specific boundaries. If you're anxiously attached, you likely have not set any boundaries.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
someone who's anxiously attached doesn't understand boundaries, which means that they will accept for the mo like in generally they'll accept poor behavior from their partner because they're so afraid that they're going to be abandoned, that the partner
Mhm,
is going to leave. And so they accept poor behavior, right? And then it gets to the point where it gets worse and worse and worse. So,
mhm.
you know, if you understand about setting boundaries and you can set this earlier in the relationship, you never get to that point where it
Yes.
gets even worse. You
Okay.
know? So, if someone is angry at you or you're angry at someone, that's okay. I think it's a good point of reflection.
Okay.
Um, I don't see it as a bad thing.
Okay. Wow, that's okay. That's a good one. So, and if the anger is, but I guess it's all about how what next steps, and you did make a very good point. You don't have to do anything necessarily about it. You could just acknowledge it and then still continue within the process or talk about it in a way that's not fight or flight fight just an extreme, right? So it doesn't have to become overly dramatic and it doesn't have to be you just kind of walking out of the process.
Yeah, so, we tend to, as humans, we tend to make everything about ourselves. It's this interesting thing that we do, right? Yeah, we
Yeah.
all do it. So it's like, if someone is angry towards me, my instinct generally is, what did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? And with it, but most of the time when people are angry,
Hmm.
it's not really about you. Something is triggered within them, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing is to watch the level of the reaction that people have. So I like to gauge things on like a scale, like 1 to 10. So whenever someone has an emotional reaction that's
Mhm.
higher than a 5,
Yeah.
so pretty intense,
Mhm.
right? Like a 6, a 7, an 8, like we're getting to like, like an eruption type of level. It's almost never about the incident or people that are unfolding in front of the person in that moment. It's triggering something unresolved from the
Mm.
past. So the
Okay.
level of response that someone gives. So, for example, you're
Yeah.
in the middle of a negotiation and you're getting close to closing a deal and you say, okay, we have this final thing, drop off will be Sundays at 8 o'clock, something mundane.
Yes.
And the man stands up and goes, I will not agree to that. And everyone's like, where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you seen this
Oh
before?
my God, all the time. Are you talking about yesterday?
Okay. So, yeah, you would think I was in your conference room. No, I've seen plenty of people like their behavior, right? So when you have someone that has this explosive response, it is
Yes.
not about what's in front of them. Most of the time, it's because there's a trigger there that was really activated. So a lot of the times we're looking at core wounds like I am disrespected. So in the
Okay.
moment they are feeling disrespected or they're feeling unseen or unheard
Yeah.
or something like that. Um,
Okay.
so it's generally when the explosion is so intense, uh, the right thing to do in that moment is to say, would you like to take a few minutes to calm down? Because
Mhm.
that person cannot negotiate at that point.
Yes, exactly. No, absolutely. Okay. Wow. I mean, Bev, I have so much to go and I'm trying. We definitely need to do a part two because I have so many questions
Sure,
to ask. But
sure,
I think I just want to, if it's okay, I would like to just, I have a few more questions that I want us to at least go
sure,
through today. Is that fine?
sure.
Oh, this is amazing. So I think what I'm wondering at this point is, um, how possible is it, how realistic is it for someone to actually, kind of change their attachment styles and change their behaviors and responses to these triggers after the separation, after separation has happened? Because this sounds to me like, well, maybe if we had done a lot of these work beforehand, we wouldn't be where we are, but we are where we are. Um,
Mhm.
and, so I think maybe a more concrete example would be, if we're in the process of a mediation, for example. And so I observe these things and I'm like, well, I think it would benefit you to have a conversation with Bev. And, you do it for both parties. And we always encourage like our clients to have those conversations. Obviously, I've never understood it as fully as you've presented it at this point, but we've always known that we all need to work on ourselves so we can bring our best selves to the table. But so let's say we're doing that. How helpful is that even during the negotiating process? Is there hope or are we just wasting our time in that situation?
No, there's always hope. So, humans can really accomplish many incredible things with our mind and our body if we're
Mhm.
motivated to do so, right? So
Okay.
it's the same thing. Like if you're committed to, for example, I don't know, you want to lose 20 pounds,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
You could do it in 3 months. It could take you a year, or you could never do it at all. It depends on the level of motivation and effort that you apply into this, right?
Hmm.
But the mind is very malleable, just like the rest of our body. So if you choose that you want to make changes to your physique for your physical health,
Yeah.
um, you absolutely can do the same thing for your mind. Now, you know, there's no good or bad time to start this. Once people become aware of their attachment style, generally it peaks a level of interest where they go, oh, okay, this is like most of the time people start diving into understanding, okay, well, where do I fall and why do I? It helps to understand why, when I'm frustrated, do I feel the need to leave a room? Or why, why can't, for example, if I'm angry with my partner, why can't I go to sleep until we finish the argument? There's certain
Yeah.
things. Or, why when I'm stressed do I come home and reach for a bag of Cheetos? Why, because these are, again, it's all tied to how we're trying to handle and deal with our emotions. Why is it so difficult for me to be alone? Like, have you known people who end one relationship and they've got someone waiting in the wings because
Yes.
they can't be alone, right? Why is it
Mhm.
so difficult for me to be alone? Why do I always need to be in a partnership? This is all tied back to, again, those initial patterns that you received as a child. And
Yeah.
so any time, whether post-divorce, pre-divorce, is a good time to start understanding your own mind, your own patterns, and making tweaks. What's working for you today?
Hmm.
What's no longer serving you well? And then ultimately, I think everyone would say that they're just trying to reach a level of happiness. That,
Yes.
once they finish the divorce, you hopefully you want to get through the divorce process, relatively unscathed,
Hmm.
like, you know,
Hmm.
relatively intact, and then,
Yeah.
find another romantic partner. Well, I can promise you that if you don't do the work to understanding your own attachment style and making some changes, that the next partner and the next dynamic of the relationship you have will be exactly the same.
I'm glad you mentioned romantic partners because that's something I wanted to kind of talk about. So, if someone's dating again, I mean, I can see how sort of understanding yourself just makes you a better person. And thanks for sharing, your personal experience with your partner and just sort of what you do. And I find that that's so powerful. And I was thinking, well, if you're even stepping away for an hour, like logically, the dynamic of that conversation would completely change because at least they're not thinking, well, it doesn't go from, well, we need to talk about, this cup of tea to becoming, well, why did they leave? They always leave, and then this and that. Like now, everyone can just you could safely take the space that you need. They can understand that it's not about them and you're not abandoning them. And I can just see that
Exactly.
resolving most of it. And it's
Yeah.
just, that's so powerful because it just stems from that self-awareness. So it's not just
Yes.
you doing something, just on the fly. You're just so self-aware that, that is just incredible. Now that so yes, yes, yes. So yeah, no, I'm just reflecting on so much. I'm thinking about people that I work with. I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking this is just,
Hmm.
absolutely fantastic. I've never realized how important it is for you to really understand your attachment styles. This
Yeah,
goes
it
just beyond
really,
therapy and talking about sort of what happened to you and clearing the air with things. This is really you just getting to know you, really.
getting to know you and then understanding that, okay, you have a set of strategies that you use to keep yourself
Mhm.
somewhat emotionally regulated, right? So when an avoidant walks away from conversation, um, that it's because they're taking space to try to emotionally regulate. So in their
Okay.
minds, they know why they're doing it. But to the receiver, it's like it's very rude behavior. We're in the middle of a conversation and you're just walking out. Like, who do you think you are, right?
Yes.
But and so it's kind of like, honor what it is that you need, but communicate so that you minimize the negative impact on the other person. And,
Yeah.
and I promise you that if you start talking more honestly and authentically and with kindness,
Yeah.
that things will just become a lot more harmonious, right?
Okay.
And so when I say to my partner, like, because my partner is anxious, so if I were to just disappear, that would drive him nuts.
Yeah.
He would think that I'm just breaking up with him, right?
Yeah.
And which is, why would I want to cause him that pain?
Exactly.
So it's about being mindful of what you need, but what your partner also needs,
Yeah.
and finding the balance between the two. And people always say that communication in relationships is so important, but I think the point that people miss is that unless you truly understand yourself and your needs, and you understand your partner and their needs, what are you communicating?
No, but
Like,
you nailed this so much because when people are saying communication, and myself included, I'm thinking, well, you just want us to sit here and talk about this to the death of it. Like we're talking, like there's nothing more to communicate. But
right.
this is different. You're
This is different.
communicating so that the other person understands where you're coming from. You're communicating like it's just
Yes.
different. So you're right. Like people just say communicate, but I think a lot of us interpret that as meaning we have to keep talking about the issue at all costs. And sometimes you're just done
No.
with the conversation.
Yeah, you're just done with the conversation. Right. No,
Yeah.
no, no. I think it's really about and I kindness is actually a very big part of the equation here, right? Because
Mm,
what you're being kind to yourself by asserting what it is you need, but you're also
yes.
being kind to the other person by not purposefully trying
Mm,
to trigger them,
yes.
right?
Exactly.
So yeah,
No,
I
I
think
love
that
that.
yeah, your personality needs is something that I work with my clients on all the time is identifying this is what you need, right?
Yes. And I mean, you've talked about the extremes, and it's easy for those of us that are the extremes to see ourselves, but for the wide majority of people that are on that spectrum, they probably they need more of a deep dive to really be able to understand. And I'm even sure, like for someone that's thinking they're one way, I would not be surprised if they work with you and find out, like, no, that's not really who you are. This is just a mask that you're putting on, I guess, for you really need to take that deep dive to understand, your style better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Because I just think that a lot of us go through life and we don't really ask ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
what it is that I need, what really drives me, what brings me happiness, what brings me peace, right?
Okay.
What's most important to me? So like I could very clearly say that what's important to me is peace and harmony, loyalty. Like when I met my new partner, we've been
Yeah.
together half a year. I said to him, this is what's important to me, peace, harmony, loyalty, friendship.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're, emotional stability, if you're not
Yeah.
emotionally stable, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, if you've got all sorts of drama going on in your world,
Yeah.
that's not going to meet my need for harmony,
Yes. Wow. Thanks,
right?
Deb. I want to end with this, and I'm sure there's a lot you can add, but this is sort of my last question for you. And it's just around for people that are going through, a separation right now, what can they do to model, secure attachments for their children? Because yes, maybe they've been doing it wrong, all along up until this point. What can they do now going forward? And now we're thinking they're in separate homes. So you have mom and dad, or the moms or dads in separate relationships. What can each person sort of do to model, secure attachment style? And before we even go there, Bev, is it fair to say, for children, just the divorce process in and of itself may could probably tend to push them into insecurity and on some level?
Yes or no, it depends on the level of chaos. It depends on the age of the children, right? So some divorces, I
Okay.
mean, when I got divorced, there was very little drama, very little chaos, and still good friends with my ex-husband. So,
Love
you
that.
know, yeah, I mean, so there was none of that. But if children are forced to endure high conflict homes, lots of chaos, lots of screaming, and then dragged in, to see judges and make decisions, all of that is very traumatic. But you
Okay.
don't have to do that to children,
Yes.
right? What children, I hear this all the time. I hear parents say, I would do anything for my kid. And
Yes.
except they're completely emotionally dysregulated, which means that, I don't know, somebody looks at them funny and they're screaming.
Yes.
They wake up and they're just angry and they're
Mm.
stomping their feet, or they're just a child needs at least one parent who's emotionally stable.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
doesn't mean perfect. It means emotionally safe. So
Okay.
somebody who is rational, who has emotions, but who's going to listen, doesn't
Okay.
mean they're going to give you everything you want, right? But it
Yeah.
just means that it's like, hey, I understand you want a cookie, you can be angry about it, but you're going to eat your dinner first and the cookie will come after. Like, that's reasonable.
Okay.
Child need for their mental health and their development and their growth into good human beings, they need one emotionally safe parent.
Okay.
Better if they have two,
Mm-hmm.
right? But and so what can parents do when they're going through a
Yeah, to
divorce
kind of
or to
model
protect their
that
children?
behavior. Yes.
They can learn how to emotionally regulate themselves.
Mm.
Because when you learn the skills and how to emotionally regulate yourself, the divorce process is going to go smoother. Your relationship with your kids is going to be smoother. Your kids are going to greatly benefit from having that safe space with you, even if they
Yeah.
don't have it with the other parents.
Okay.
You be the parent that's the safe space. And then you teach your kids how to emotionally regulate because if they know how to do that, and emotional regulation means that when I have a feeling that comes to me and it's uncomfortable, how do I deal with it in the moment? So if I'm really angry in the moment, I can scream at someone or I can breathe or I can think about why I'm angry, or I can go for a walk. Or what do we see in the States now? It's just terrible. We see a lot of gun violence. We
Yeah.
see a lot of school shootings. We see a lot of addictions. Like there's a
Mm.
lot of crime. This all comes from anger and rage. It's all
Mhm.
product of being emotionally dysregulated, all
I
of that
see.
chaos. And so if you can learn how to deal with emotions that feel very big.
Okay.
I mean, listen, I teach my clients when you're feeling like you're about to explode, go do 20 jumping jacks and 10 push-ups.
Yes.
Release the energy, release it. It's an energy, is what it is. But you've
Okay.
never learned it, right? So
Yeah.
release the energy and
Mhm.
then resume the conversation. But if you can learn yourself these skills in adulthood that you never learned in childhood, and then teach your own kids, you're
Yeah.
doing you're doing your kids such a great thing by modeling that for them.
Absolutely. Wow. This is such great stuff. I can't believe how much wisdom and, you know, transformational information that you've packed into this hour. It's amazing. I will be listening to this several times myself. No, really, I think, just doing this work is, I think everyone needs to do this. Like, really, that's all I can say. We all need to, because if I have a better understanding of myself and you have a better, like, then communication becomes easier. Because you know what I was
Yeah,
thinking too, Bev? I could say something to you and or the example you gave with your partner, if it's someone that's also not understanding or haven't hasn't done some work on themselves, they may not even hear the message that you're communicating, right? And they would still interpret it the wrong way. So it's just, this is
yeah.
such great work that you're doing. I don't know if there's
Thank
anything
you.
more you have to add because you have given us so much.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. I'll leave you with a parting thought that
Yeah.
when we talk about emotional regulation and how our nervous system moves from rest and digest to this threat mode, there's
Mhm.
one initial trigger that is very telling. So the first sign of emotional dysregulation or that you're about to move into, threat mode protection is irritability. And so when you're around someone and you can tell that they're getting irritable, you can
Mhm.
tell that they're teetering onto moving into their threat protection mode from their rest and digest mode. And
Mhm.
that's a great place to stop and say, I can see that you're getting irritable. What's eating at you right now? And at that point, they could say something like, I'm just feeling really disrespected. Okay.
Mhm.
right? Like before it gets to a point of escalation, you
Yeah.
will always see moments of irritability before. So look for that.
Awesome. That is good stuff. Thank you so much, Bam. We appreciate this great conversation and hope to have you back to dig deeper
That's,
into some of these topics. And I know everyone's wondering how they can work with you, so we will have your contact information in the description section below. And just thank you for the work you do, Bam.
thank you. Thank you for the work you do.
Thanks.